Thank you, everyone, for listening to Soul Talk with host Jeremy McDonald, the author of Peace Be Still. You can check out more about our shows or about Jeremy at soultalkradio.org and jeremymcdonald.net. And now for our show.
Hello, and thank you, everybody, for listening to Soul Talk. I have a wonderful guest tonight, and I've been reading her book today called Black Smoke, Healing and Ayahuasca Shamanism in the Amazon. And this is one woman's diagnosis of breast cancer leads to a shamanic healing in the Amazon jungle. And I have to say that healing with cancer is very dear to my heart because my mother passed away from uterine cancer a couple of years ago. And so, the subject of that and healing with cancer is obviously very dear to my heart. So welcome to the show, Margaret. Our author here is Margaret De Wys, and welcome to the show. She's calling in from New York, everybody. So, hi, Margaret. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Jeremy. I'm sorry about your mother.
Well, the good part is that she walks and talks with me now. So,
that's forever, okay?
So, nobody told me that she still is my mother in spirit, too.
Really? Wow.
Well, just meaning that she still gives the motherly advice and the spiritual advice and all that kind of stuff, and I kind of joke, and I'm like, listen. The ego gets involved.
Does she talk to your friends and acquaintances also?
My friends and my acquaintances.
Yeah, could I talk to her?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you about that at the convenient time for you.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to touch. One of the things I'm really kind of excited about, and I've studied a little bit about ayahuasca, and one of the key things that I've always heard was purging, and it makes a tremendous amount of sense. The chapter you talk about purging, when we're the amount of stuff that comes out of us, and when Carlos, you're the shaman that guided you through this, and you're the healer that helped you through all of this, he showed you this is what was in you, and you needed this to come out, and even explained it to you. That is something that made me think, I'm like, how many people out there on this planet are living with these parasites and things in their body that they're not cleansing out of their body, and we're walking around with that every day. So,
well, we are. I mean, everybody is. It's just the nature of being in, a physical body. But, for instance, in India, they clean themselves frequently. They use a rope in the stomach. In South Africa, they're always cleansing. And many countries outside of our civilized world will clean themselves every 1 or 2 weeks. That goes without saying, and of course that's very odd for us in our culture, where you take a pill and it's supposed to clean you or do something. I don't know, but it does. It takes out bile from the liver. It takes out bacteria. It takes out viruses. If you have parasites, it'll take that out. It takes out some things that will cause GERD or upset stomach. And during a purge, a lot of times emotions will come out at the same time, which is very interesting. So in all ways to look at it, it's a very healing thing because it's cleaning. And cleaning, what can be better than cleaning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just kind of getting all that junk out there. What I found...
Yeah.
What I found very interesting, actually, is that through your journey to walking, and even in your descriptions of what you were seeing, like there's a point where you looked and you saw 10-foot crocodiles not that far from you. It's almost like it was very apparent that you were going through a journey even before you started taking the medicine, I guess we would refer to it as, or the purging and stuff like that. You were facing your fears because you had to keep on moving forward.
Well, that's absolutely true, and but one should always still recognize that if you have live crocodiles on either side of you, it is dangerous. That's the bottom line, and the Amazon can be dangerous. Just on its own, it's very beautiful and it's sublime, and that's where death and life takes place. I mean, things that decay bring life to other things. So it's popping with that reality.
Well, yeah, and then that's natural. That's natural law. That one thing applies to the other to sustain life and carry on life, and life becomes eternal. So, just from
True that.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So let's go back up a little bit. So when you were diagnosed, you were a music teacher at Bard College.
Right.
You're a composer, and so you did a tremendous amount with your life up to this point, of getting your diagnosis with cancer, and then you actually had a dream that said, "Go check out your, go to see a doctor."
Yeah, that was one of those niggling dreams, and I think, just human nature, when something's up that you don't want to deal with, you kind of push it down. It's true. I mean, I was composing music in Europe and the United States, and this dream kept coming, and this little figure came, and he kept pointing at my breast. He said, "You have to go to the doctor. You have something there. You must go." And I thought, I'm just having a bad dream. And he came several times, and I eventually went to the doctor, and they said, look what we found. You need radiation, you need surgery, you need hormone pills, all this stuff. And that threw me into another state. And I know people that go through crisis, whether it's the death of a loved one or physical illness, it can do big things to wake you up. That's my experience.
Well, and then you discovered that the body is always talking to you as a result through this journey.
Right. I mean, now I'm very clear about that. Somehow, and of course, I'm not discounting the importance, but, writing for orchestra and going here and there, that was all very exciting, and my family was very exciting, and who wants to interrupt what you're right in the middle of? And we all get interrupted. Life is not our schedule. We kind of forget that, I think, every so often. So it came to the point that, yes, indeed, I was walking down the street and someone said to me, there's this very big Mayan ritual, the 13-year Cholton before the year 2012, and the prophecy says people from all the races have to be there, and it's very specific. There's one more place for a white person. Do you want to go? And they said there's going to be hundreds of healers that are coming to do the ritual. And I said, hey, this is my chance. I can go there. I can find a healer, and that'll be that. So I went to Guatemala, and there were many, many very powerful medicine people there. And I said that this one could heal me, or he could, or she could, but I didn't tell anybody I was sick. And so finally, this Amazonian Indian from the high upper Amazon in Ecuador came in a full regalia with a toucan feather headdress and bare-chested, barefoot, with all the regalia of his tribe. And he said, I can see inside your body. You're sick. And he pointed to where I was sick, and he said, if you come to the Amazon jungle, I will heal you. Oh, wow. And I said, but how can you tell? He said, I'm looking at your body. I can see through it like you're a looking glass. I can see your blood, your veins, your organs. Come. And I said, okay. And I went home to New York, and I said to my daughter and my husband, I'm going to go for the rest of my treatment in Ecuador. I'm going to get healed by someone in the jungle. And they said, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? Can't you just do what the doctors are telling you? And I said, I'm going. And that's how it all began.
Wow. And so that man was Carlos, the...
It was, and I just talked to him on the phone last week. He's something. I take people down that are sick, and if I can't go, I send them down to him on occasion, depending. So yeah, he's an amazing bush doctor, an incredible doctor.
Well, it's very interesting. It seems like he just understands how the jungle works and the herbs and the plants and everything that work well with the body, but it seems like that whole culture or civilization, even down to the white teeth, that you asked about,
right.
Why is your teeth white? So it's almost like they're imbalanced.
The thing is, he was born there. His father was an Uishin, his grandfather, his mother. Uishin is what we would call a medicine man, and that's in the Shuar tradition. Actually, if you don't mind, could I just read a little passage from my book that
Absolutely.
talks about him? When we're in the jungle, he says to me, Margarita, I can build a bamboo and palm house in a day. I'm self-sufficient in the jungle. I can make bows and arrows, make curare, build a fire, make more than 200 medicines, gather fruit, make clothes, hunt and fish. I am complete. Survival in La Selva, in the jungle, is very difficult, though. When the Spanish came 500 years ago, they told the Shuar that we were uncivilized savages who lived in the jungle like animals. But this is not true. My people told the conquistadores, we do not live in the jungle lives in us. Margarita, I am one with her. I am not in the jungle is within me. The wisdom I hold cannot be learned from a book, but from the earth, which sends its voice through my body. We are one and the same. That's Carlos. He literally is a man of the earth. And he understands the earth, he understands the human body, and he understands life and death very completely.
Very beautiful. It reminds you of I can't remember what movie that was, but the indigenous people were at tune with the earth, or the planet that they lived on, and the other people came in and disrupted that.
Is that Avatar?
Yes. Thank you.
I think they shot that in Ecuador, or some of it in Ecuador. There's something about Ecuador and Avatar. I can't remember. Or maybe the director went down there.
So through this journey you went through, and obviously you were healed, and have you had any, by modern medicine, you've been in remissions. How long has that been?
Well, number one, for anybody that's sick, studies show, of course, if you say the word remission to a patient rather than that they're healed, the ones that have remission are ones that are more likely to get sick again because they still think they're in the loop. That's just how it is. It's been about 13 or 14 years. I had one little incident sometime after that, and I went to South Africa and talked to a high Zulu priest who set me straight. But, I'm done with that. Done with it.
That's interesting that people that have HIV, they have a term called they're undetectable, which doesn't mean that they're healed. It means that the virus is not active. And I'm like, well, wouldn't it mean that they're healed? And they're like, no, because the virus is still in them. I'm like, seems like we're going to cause them.
Yeah, but, the chicken pox is still in us if we got it when we were 5, okay? And what are you going to tell me? What else do you have to say? The doctors have their own data plan, and they tell somebody, you're going to die in 3 months, you're terminal, go put your affairs in order. They don't know any better. They don't know any better. And I know people, when I was sick, I called everybody that was told, hey, it's over for you, and I asked them what they did. And these people were alive 26 years later and in good health. So, the medical profession does wonderful things, but there's a certain kind of headset that doesn't allow for someone who's very vulnerable when you're sick to have a chance. If somebody says, oh, you're dying in 3 months, then, it's like that idea of superstitious magic. It kills you. It could. I'm not saying in all cases that's true.
So through your journey, what and this is interesting, this just popped into my head. I just thought about this. Through your journey, what would you say causes cancer, or is it different for every person?
That's a question. What causes disease is a question that I've been thinking about for now 15 or so years. There are different things. Some are on a physical level where, environmental toxins or eating foods that have cancerous substances in them for a long period of time. There's emotional components that can cause disease. They do all these tests about stress and how people get sick because of the stress. And then what I've learned is that there's also a spiritual element attached to disease. And that has to do with the spiritual body, the psychic body, which some people call etheric, and the physical body. So I would say that in all cases there's a spiritual malaise that maybe is a precursor. And there's so many other factors that, especially in our modern world, that can attach themselves to us. Many cancers, I think, now are viral, and it's a very personal situation. It's not one shoe fits every foot.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense. There's a research out there with cancer that talks about, I think it's the Cancer Centers of America. They try different approaches on purpose because they say that you can't do a one-size-fit-all on cancer treatment. So I just found they use Reiki and acupuncture, and I'm sure they would not be opposed to eventually shamanic-type healing and stuff like that, because they realize that if you try to approach something the same way every time, you're not going to get it correctly. So.
Well, I'm glad you brought that word up, shamanic healing, because someone like Carlos, who's an Uishan, he's a spiritual leader that has tools up the kazuni in terms of herbs, his understanding of nature and the body, his very high-level energy that comes through him, a source of energy, and then he also uses ayahuasca, which helps him. This is really interesting because a patient will be, in a hut, will be with them, and there'll be one candle burning. So it's the middle of the jungle. It's very, very dark, and he has to have it as dark as possible so that he can see inside the body, and he can tell. I've had patients with severe Lyme come where they can't walk and they haven't been out of bed for 5 years, and he can see the spirochetes, and he can see the Lyme, he can see where it is, and over the days and days and days that he works with a person, less and less is visible, and it's kind of like so exciting when, after 10 or 12 days they're dancing and they can go swimming and hiking, and they could barely walk when they got there.
Oh, wow.
So he works also with a number of spirits, a black jaguar, a Tibetan. There's a couple of female spirits, and when he's working, I help him, and I see the spirits that enter him to do the healing work, and it's phenomenal. So for me, I think of him not as a shaman, because I don't know what that word means anymore. It's been bantered around so much. I just know how he works and what he does, and there are other people that I work with in different parts of the world and how they manage disease, and they all basically say that the healing force is love, which is also something bantered about very casually in the New Age world.
Right. Well, and that's actually interesting you say that. I actually saw I was at a conference this morning, and you can feel the presence of spirit if you're in that in a space in your pureness, and then you can also just say the words and you don't feel anything. I say I love you, but my mind is saying something different, but if my heart is singing I love you, you can feel the energy surge through you, and I think that's basically kind of what you're talking about. The words are thrown around, but the sincerity is not necessarily there. I think that's important.
One can, it's just such an extraordinary difference. But it's beautiful. I also work with John of God, the Brazilian healer, and it's just extraordinary, the energy, the amount of entities that are working on different people, and it's so palpable in the air. I mean, you can see people fainting, and it's extraordinary. Not that anybody gets hurt from it, because it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful healing energy.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You should bring him up, because I've known people that have gone down to see him, and I've drank water that he's blessed. And I did a journeying down, a hike down into what's called Canyon de Chelly in the Navajo Reservation out in Arizona.
Oh, lucky you!
It was beautiful. There's a healers gathering every year that I spoke at the first year out there, but anyways, I drank the water, and the amount of energy that I got, because it's a mile hike down, and a mile hike back up. The hike down is a lot easier than the hike back up.
Yeah, it always is. You know that, Jeremy.
But the energy from the water, really, where you're exhausted, almost kicks you back into space, and you can feel the tremendous amount of love. But you can even see when I watched the Oprah interview with him, and you could see the spirits enter him. You saw it when he changed.
Oh, yeah. And, he was upstate, where I live upstate New York a few weeks ago. When he comes to the U.S., I work as a medium for him. And we saw close to 2,000 people a day. I mean, I didn't see anything. I had my eyes shut, okay? And he had his eyes open, but he wasn't in his body. I've been going down to Brazil since 2001, and it's phenomenal. I've been so fortunate, really, to meet the best, most spiritual healers, which I think just about all of them are. That I can't imagine someone that's a great healer that's not spiritual, but it could happen. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess anything could happen.
Exactly.
So you're doing, I think a few months ago, you were doing an initiation. Am I correct? Or so you're doing the same work? Or?
Yeah, that's I'm working on a lot of levels right now that I'm not allowed to talk about those things. But yeah, I'm pretty busy all the time doing stuff with different beings and healers.
So no, are you composing still and teaching, or are you
I have
teaching?
to say that, my months and years in Ecuador, I would have a piece in New York and I wouldn't show up for it. And, people lost interest in me. What can I tell you? I wasn't in the country, and I didn't. Well, it wasn't that I didn't care, but this was so important.
I do understand that. I live by myself, and there are times where I go days without talking to anybody or answering the phone, and people are like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm great."
Oh, gosh.
I just want to eat.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of healing work do you do?
That's a very hard thing to say because I don't really have a name for it. My mother was a Qigong practitioner and all that. She has all the names, but she finally taught me this. She said, "Jer, it's all in the mind. It's all in the imagination. And when you can let go of all the labels, you can heal yourself." And then I have another friend and teacher that taught me that. And finally, you listen, you hear it, but until you experience it, I just realized I don't really have a process for it. I just know what Spirit tells me. So, I don't know what to call it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So, well, let's kind of talk. We'll kind of dive a little bit into when you were going through your. Obviously, there's more to the. You purged and then you went on a journeying. And you were healed. What happened after that? I mean, was there still a journey that happened after?
Oh, yes, Jeremy, yeah. That was just the beginning. I went back to New York. I went into the hospital in New York City, and they said, "Oh, there's nothing there. You're fine." But they were very you should take the radiation. Still, you should do this and that. And part of me was thinking, maybe the doctor has to say that, or he's going to get sued or something. Maybe it's the law. I don't know. But I basically said, no, thank you. I think I'll just do what I'm doing. And then he whispered to me, he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So I guess he didn't want the nurse to know. I don't know. And then I spent part of the summer with my daughter. She went off to boarding school, and then I went back to Ecuador, and I trained with Carlos. And I went and met his mother and his brothers and sisters, and we did a lot of healings on people deep in the jungle. So there's a lot about the different kind of work that he and I did together. And there's little things in the book, like, for instance, he was working on someone who had uterine fibroids, and he was using crystals. And he would put these crystals, which he called grandmother crystals from the center of the earth, and he would put them on her uterus, and he would show me where and how, to find certain things. And like, for instance, one little trick, which is beautiful, he would say, if you want to know the power of a crystal, you just take the tip and you put it on the tip of your tongue, and you can feel the electricity coming through. And so, I have a lot of crystals because I spent so much time in Brazil, and I'll put my tongue on different ones, and you can feel these different powers, and it's great. It's really beautiful. And then, we made medicines for certain people. There were people with cancer and other diseases, heart diseases, and all sorts of things. And then at one point I brought him to the United States, and we did a lot of ceremonies in New York, and I explained how different that is than being in the jungle and what the different problems were. And eventually we went to a Native, he said, I want to meet my brothers and sisters. So we went to a Native American gathering. And the elders from Canada were very impressed with him, and they asked for his blessings. And then they asked if he and I would come up onto the reservation to work on people, and that was just mind-blowing. We would see 40 or 50 people at a time, and we would put heroin addicts in one spot and heart patients in another, and it was really a lot of sickness, and we did some great things there. And then I don't want to tell you the end of the book because, maybe somebody wants to discover really everything that happened. Eventually, he and I stopped working together for a while, and I went to Africa and Brazil and Bali and Egypt and worked with some people. And then when Carlos was back in Ecuador, I had an apartment in Ecuador, and I would bring people down. I still do, and we would do treatments on people in Ecuador, and that's the short version. And in the long version, there's a lot of detail and kind of fun things, a lot of tales about the Shuar and when Carlos was born. The first thing that he had before mother's milk was ayahuasca. And his father named him God of the Black Jaguars. And his mother was extraordinary. She died last year.
Oh, wow. So you said he understood life and death. I know what Western culture believes in life and death, but what would that be for him or you now that you've gone through all of this?
In the simplest terms, when a person is born, they go through a transition. And as they age and get older, they die, and there's another transition where birth and death are basically so similar. I believe it too, that we are not just our physical bodies, that we're spiritual, and that we live in the spirit world too. So for him, to die is to come home. And like so many other cultures, he believed in rebirth. And he had a cosmology. It's described in my book how the universe works. And he's taken trips to the sun and different planets. And many people that have worked with have too. And the funny thing is, they all say the same thing, so they must be seeing the same thing, okay?
Well, and I think that
comes
down to the part where the forest is in me, but then everything else is in me, isn't it?
Right. That's the same thing. He says, if our bodies are sick, the earth is sick. There's no distinction. There's no separation there. And which is true because we're made out of the same materials as the earth is made out of. And if we poison the earth, how can we not be poisoned? It's not, it's almost like saying, well, if you put radiation in your right hand, it's going to go to the left hand. Period. That's it.
Wow.
Right?
That makes a lot of sense. We're a symbiont. We are one. So
we are one, yeah.
So I think that, our separation really, our feeling of separation really causes the dis-ease, I guess, or dis-ease, some people like to say.
True enough, yeah.
So we did a lot of traveling, and healing other people, that's absolutely beautiful. And obviously it's a continuous growth since then. So how would you, I guess, look at, if you were to face death again, how would you see it now? I guess is the question I want to ask,
I don't know. I really don't know. The most interesting thing for me is that one of the things that I'm working on is astral projection, where I can do it at will. And when you can do that, you can be at any place in the earth or outside of the earth, and you can visit different beings and so on. But I think the thing that I would like, if I can manage it, is when I die that I'm conscious, so that I can take my consciousness and be in the spirit world without the kind of confusion or sometimes people, they sense darkness or they don't know where they are or they forget. And I would like to be able to keep my memory, my consciousness, the memory, who gives a shit, right? Oops. But I'd like to keep my consciousness. So in that sense, I think that would be extraordinarily beautiful. And that's actually what I'm working on in a big way now.
Wonderful.
And also finding out what I need to do for the rest of this journey that I have. What's the important things that I need to accomplish, and those all have to do with spiritual points that really elevate the soul. So if I go tomorrow, I might not have finished, this project that I'm going to call it a project, but I'll be all right because I'll come back and get it.
Well, the soul is infinite, so, you have plenty of time.
What do you think?
Well, the reason why I asked that is because I've had many experiences since Mom had transitioned, I guess. There's a better way. I had what some would call a shared death experience with her, where I don't know what I would call it, but I just felt submerged into heavenly consciousness. And I look at death as a transition. I fully believe that a soul can transition, almost instantly manifest into the physical and manifest back into the spiritual. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I've had.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do.
So it's, when you hear stories of Babaji who manifested at a very young age and then left the earth, back in the 60s or 70s, came in as a teenage boy, and I'm very positive that there's a point where you can let go of the physical enough to realize that it is this is what it is. However, there is something very infinite, and there's two worlds, but they're one and the same. So
exactly.
I don't know. Death is always the ending, but it's always the beginning. So,
Yeah, I'm under the belief at the moment that when we're in physical body, there are certain things that we can accomplish that we can't when we're not in a body.
Right.
And it's usually things for our soul to evolve. And this is the hard work joint, Earth. Okay, that's what I think. And so once we understand, even if you're working with spirits, you need to ground them. They can't just come down without an anchor of some kind. And people, you hear me, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, you're an anchor, I'm an anchor, and we're doing things that that we can't do if we're not in a body that we're supposed to be doing now. So that's, you and me are talking. Okay.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense, actually. And I had an experience about 2.5 years ago where my mother, right after she transitioned, she sat down at a student of mine that was taking me out to dinner for my birthday. She sat down at the table with us, and her energy was so intense that it made the woman, my student, sick. And and I just in my mind said, "All right, Mom, back it up." She backed her energy up, and the woman starts to feeling better. And she said, "What was that?" I said, "Well, sometimes energy is so intense, our physical, it's too hard for it to manage it.
Right.
You have to ground back into your body." And so she have to ground back into her body, and she was like, much better. I felt very queasy there, and so it was, the physical. If there's too much light or whatever it is, or energy coming in, it's almost like it starts to shake apart. And it has to face. It's like a mirror of light to make them face their darkness.
Indeed, yeah, that's true. I mean, sometimes the light. I spoke with someone once. The light was so intense with this being that came and burned off his clothes.
It burned off his what?
Clothes. His clothes were all
wow.
singed. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, but it's like John of God, for instance. He has his body has a tremendous capacity to hold these entities of light, and then they command thousands. If you have 2,000 people you're working on, the entities say, "How many today?" And you say 2,000, so they bring in more, so that there's at least one healing doctor entity for each person. And these entities go home with them too, But even John of God, for instance, maybe 20 years ago or something like that, he was doing a healing in front of people, like 10,000, and he fell down on the stage, and he'd had a stroke, because sometimes when you're incorporating entities, it's very hard on the physical body. So they took him to the hospital, and they hooked him up to EKGs and everything, and all the machines exploded. Eventually he went home, and he was in a wheelchair. And after a few months he said, "I can't stand this anymore, I have to heal." So when he would get up in front of people and an entity came in, his body was fine. And after so many months of this, the entity spoke through João, and he said, "João has been healing everyone, now we will heal him." So the entity called for a scalpel, which was in João's hand. He took it, cut open his chest, pulled out a clot from near his heart, threw it down, closed up his chest with a couple of stitches, which 10,000 people witnessed, by the way. And since that day, he's been okay. But he does, still it's very hard on the body. Some of the entities that he used to incorporate, he cannot anymore because the energy is too strong, and he's 70. I mean, I'm telling you, he's very strong, but the body can take what it can take.
Thank you so much, because this topic, and I'm sure that people are listening are learning something too. That brings a whole bunch of things together for me, and I really appreciate that.
You're so welcome. Yeah.
Because I had a meditation 6 months ago, and I heard your body is being prepared for an enormous spirit. And I thought, soul? And I heard, your soul is infinite. Your body is being prepared for a spirit that's really... It's like, okay.
Good luck with that, Jeremy.
So I'm like, I'm like, that's a conversation for another time. But it just made me smile because there are a lot of healers out there, and there are a lot of people, and we find also a lot of times, and this is an interesting topic, healers tend to get sick, or they go through experiences. So is that them getting sick for the wrong reasons, or is it being sick because the body couldn't sustain? It wasn't ready. And that's an interesting thing to think about. So, just
they always say. I mean, they always say the standard definition of a shaman is someone who has a sickness that has to be healed by a spiritual being, and then they start, or if they don't, the spirit kills them. That's in the beginning. You read about someone who's been sick for 7 years, and they finally decide to accept the spirit and do the healing, and they get better. That story's been around a long time.
Yeah. I'd heard many years ago that the shaman is the master storyteller. He's the one that's he or she has mastered their story. So, very cool.
But sometimes when you hear a great storyteller like that, that's a master, it's a teaching, and it can really elevate a person, really change who they are and what they need to do. That's
I want
to.
Absolutely. And you have to really pay attention to the metaphors. This is the meaning behind the story. I was backing up because I made you thinking about that makes me. We're kind of wrapping up to the end of the show here, the next 12 minutes or so. But I was just pondering the very beginning. Carlos was actually upsetting. It seemed like he was upsetting you a little bit because he wasn't really asking you to do anything. He was almost dictating to you. And I thought to myself, he must be doing that on purpose to get her. He needs to be direct with her. And
he's a dictator.
He's a dictator.
But he also knows the best thing. He's a control freak. No, I love him. Okay. But and also he's not used to, Westerners, like if you're a Shuar and they tell you to stick your head in mud, and if the spiritual leader tells you, you better do it right now. You don't ask any questions. You just obey. But they don't do it maliciously. They do it because they know it's the best thing for you, and that's what you need.
That in itself actually is very interesting, because in Western culture, that is almost offensive to us. They're going to tell you, even down to our own pastor of our own churches, if they tell you to do something, it upsets people. Or there's some people that, we look at them and say, well, they're just doing it on blind faith. We've almost twisted where this man that we revere or this woman that we revere, because they've learned through their own experience, and then we get mad at them for telling us what we need to do that would help us.
In the beginning of the book, he said, you have to be a warrior. You're on the red path, and you can't back down, because if you do, you're going to die. This is the path of the warrior, and it's very different than what we have up here. Very, very, very different. And, the purging itself, you know how much I complained about that. I said, I'm not doing that. Are you crazy? I don't throw up on demand. And then I got buried in the earth. There were many, many, many instances every single day that kind of popped me out of my reality that I'd been born into. And I'm not saying it would have been easy for the Shuar either to do that, but this is his method with me, and it worked. It worked really good, and he also, I have to give him credit for finding me, telling me he was going to heal me, and then training me, and it became really what I wanted to do. That's what I do. I used to compose music, and that was wonderful, but this is what I do now. And he brought me there. And, you know, when I'm with people that I'm helping, I don't do what he does. Although, well, you know, some people, you know, they just want to be coddled. You know, it's me, touch me, take care of me, give me another massage, and they're not taking any responsibility for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really where the healing comes in.
Yeah, that is the biggest lesson that I learned in healing, is that you can bring the horse to water, but they have to choose to drink. In other words, you have to help the living, or you have to help the willing, then you can't coddle them necessarily. They have to find their own path.
The other thing I think that goes along exactly with what you're saying is I came to the realization that nobody heals you. It's only your body that can do the healing. It's only the God within inside you that can do it. What I think that great healers do is they can open up the venue, open up the massive space where spirit can come in, or where people can open up enough, even if it's in the subconscious. But the body heals itself. The healer, in my mind, never really heals a person. They just facilitate.
That is so true. Because when I work with people, I realize that I'm just walking them through something, but you can actually see it in their face. You can see the energy and shifts in them. Their thoughts are changing,
right?
And their feelings are changing. Their energy is changing, and their aura is changing. And I'm not really doing anything.
Their body's doing it.
Yeah,
the God in their body, the vital life force that they have, is doing it.
Yep. And then the ones that want to be coddled, they don't do anything. They keep on coming back, and those usually burn out very fast. They don't come back to me very often.
You could potentially have somebody come back to you for 25 or 30 years, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah. No thanks. I tell people I'm trying to work myself.
Just run ourselves right out of business. You know?
I'm like, good. You know. So there's black smoke healing in ayahuasca shamanism in the Amazon, and that can be found. I looked earlier; can be found on Amazon. And I'm sure it can be found
at Inner Traditions, which is the publisher.
Okay, and then the other book is, what is the name of the other book? Because I know you have a second book.
It's called Ecstatic Healing, Spirit Possession and Miraculous Medicine, I believe. The main title is Ecstatic Healing, and that's also an Inner Traditions book. And that can be found also on Amazon.
An Inner Traditions website as well. Now, what is your website? Do you have a personal website?
My website, where you can see both the books and about my trips and consultations, is called blacksmokethebook.com.
Okay, well, that's very easy to get to. Thank you. So we're down to the last 6 minutes here. I always love how my show just moves by so fast, and I feel like I don't talk about everything I want to talk about, but it was all perfect. What would you like to share with everybody before we wrap up the show?
Wow. I thought I was sharing.
You were.
Oh, you mean, do I have something? Do I have
something else?
Wow. Well, I'm curious. The audience that you have are very much interested in the healing arts. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like
that. I think that people, for themselves, to explore who they are inside. And, I was very fortunate I could go to all these countries, and I've had that path laid out. You can do it at home. People can find what is really true for their body. It's a little difficult in the West because there's too much confusion and chaos, and what can I tell you? People, if they want to contact me, my email is on the website, so that they can contact me. I would say that I have nothing special to say other than what we were talking about.
Okay.
One thing that was interesting is at the very end of the book, I go through my journals because I was writing journals as I was learning these things, and I saw a dream that was before the dream that I had cancer, and it was about a native Indian in the jungle who turned into a black jaguar, and I was with him in a tree, and I turned into a spotted jaguar. And then, all of a sudden, he turns into a man running naked through the streets of Toronto, Canada. And I looked at that because by the time the book was finished and I saw this dream, before I even knew he existed, and the dream tells an absolute story of what the whole book is about. So we all, if we can pay attention to our subconscious, our if you want to call it our superconscious, our higher self, the God in us, is always trying to reach us, and does, but we don't necessarily have the space or the quietness or the definition to understand when this is happening. And that was so beautiful to me because this dream completely telescoped the first 2 years of my life with Carlos before I even met him. And also, the black jaguar was treating me for an illness that I didn't even know I had because I hadn't had the dream about the cancer or anything like that. And dreams are important. There are all sorts of messages that we all that are available to us 24/7. So that's a beautiful thing to work on in a lifetime. Being able to get to the source,
wonderful,
which is always trying to reach us.
Absolutely. Well, I think you even say that at the beginning, even when you're talking about the body. And you say there's always, it's constantly trying to talk to us.
Yeah.
And so we're, whether we're paying attention or not is the other thing. So, and then we're constantly discovering ourselves. I think Star Trek should have said the final frontier was ourselves. In that space.
Isn't that the truth, though?
Definitely is. Well, Margaret, I have really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I know the listeners have enjoyed our conversation. I feel like an hour wasn't necessarily enough, but there's always other times. So I'm looking forward to finishing Black Smoke and emailing you my excitement after reading the rest of the book.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I'm looking forward to looking at your website. I want to know more about you, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's just my name and then .net. So you'll find it. So, everybody, thank you for listening to Soul Talk, and we will have Dr. Marilyn Schlitz on next week at 7 o'clock. So thank you, Margaret. And everybody check out Margaret's book, Black Smoke, Healing and Ayahuasca Shamanism, in the Amazon, and you can get that on Barnes & Noble. Everybody, many blessings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.